Well, it's always great to see everyone. It's always great to be a part of the weather and enjoy it, especially today. We're going to conclude our chapter studies in 2 Samuel tonight after our 14th class tonight. And we've got one more class to go for this coming Wednesday. And that class is going to be more of a reflecting class, reflecting on 1st and 2nd Samuel and thinking about how that's changed our lives. And we'll look at that at the very end. And if you're online, you've already got that posted in the chat and see what that is. And now everybody here is going to look on Facebook and find that. But I'll have it in a PowerPoint. I was just a little worried that it might be too small for people to see if it was being broadcast. So I wanted to make sure that was available to you online. But we'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 21 beginning and go through 24. It's kind of some conclusive entries, you might say. It doesn't seem to flow as much with the timeline on some chapters, but it'll all be really profitable for us. Obviously, God and the Holy Spirit did not waste paper space in writing the Bible, so it is all there for a purpose, for our benefit, and for our growth and learning. If they're bad records, they're for our exhortation to learn from that. And obviously, if they're good, we model ourselves after those. Okay, looks like everybody's about here, so we'll just go ahead and start. Let's bow in prayers before we begin. Our great and awesome God, we thank you so much that we can be called your children, that we can have this avenue of prayer, that you are so untouchable, so much higher above us, and so grand. And yet, you invite us to enter your throne room, to come before you and kneel at your feet, to make requests, to give you praise and thanks. And we thank you so much that not only that we have you, but we have so many amongst us that are your children, that aren't just friends, Father. There are people who have sacrificed for us, for me, who have given up their time, their effort, their thoughts, their prayers, their worry for all of us. We know, Father, that that is something that families do, and it's a natural thing for families to do. And even more so natural that you would send help to us in the form of a family. We pray, Father, that if there are those that do not have the family that we have, your family, that they would seek it out, that they would bow before you and desire it with their full heart. And that perhaps, Father, if you see us fit as a place for them to grow, that they could come here. Or perhaps if they're online, that they could be a part of our studies, to grow closer to us, and even to share their deepest and most vulnerable needs, so that we, Father, might handle them gently, as we handle one another gently, with great mercy and great grace, great patience, just as you have done for us. Help us in all of this demonstrate our great love for one another, so that others can see how wonderful it is to be a part of your family. We thank you so much for this hour that we have to study. We thank you so much again for our life and our health and the things that you've allowed us to become because of you and your great forgiveness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. 2 Samuel chapter 21 through 24. This phrase comes in the final chapter that we're going to look at, where David says, I will not offer what cost me nothing. I think that's just such a profound statement, because he's asking to sacrifice for the offering to God, or just the idea of sacrificing. He says, I'm not going to offer something that did not cost me anything. Okay, and we'll get there. We're going to get there tonight. I know there's a lot of ground to cover, but we're going to see a lot of things too before we get there. Okay, next slide here. Just to kind of bring us into a definition here of one thing that we've seen throughout the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. This definition here: giving or showing firm and constant support or allegiance to a person or institution. What do you think that is? Bang, man, Morgan, that is awesome. Good job. The New Oxford American Dictionary describes this as loyal. This is what loyalty is. And in fact, the opposite is just that: failing at giving or showing firm and constant support or allegiance to a person or institution. This is what disloyalty looks like. I think it's important that we see that common word that we all know the definition of, but then since we know it, we don't look at the definition so much, but it's good to see how it's phrased and how the words are put together to describe what that is. Okay? Disloyal is a failing at loyalty. And it's easy to fail at loyalty. I mean, look at it. Giving or showing firm and constant support or allegiance to a person or institution. Okay? Very easy to go away from constant. Very easy to go away from firm. And you'll see how that's played out. I'm sure you've already got things coming to mind as we've studied 1st and 2nd Samuel with David, Eli, Samuel, Saul, Absalom, all these different people that are being recorded in this book. Okay, another word I'd like to look at here. Did I already go? Okay. An act of giving up something valued for the sake of something, and I added, or someone else regarded as more important or worthy. Okay, Morgan's batting 1,000. I think she'd bat 1,000 again, but I'm not going to let her answer this one. What do you think this one is? Sacrifice. Way to go, Jake. Did you get that? Oh, she got? Way to go. Okay, so that's sacrifice. So this is tonight's objectives. We're going to see loyalty and sacrifice as we've always seen it in not as we've always seen it, but as we've continued to see it in 1st and 2nd Samuel. We're going to understand what that looks undefeatable doesn't mean undefeatable. Okay? There's a lot of things that look or appear to be too big or too good or what the right thing to go after is, but it's not. And so they should look somewhere else, or they should look beyond, if something looks too big, to something else that's bigger. You remember the people wanted Saul, and how does Scripture or God define him? Physically, head and shoulders above everyone. He looks like a king, but does not act like a king, does he? So people were limited in their sight there. Then we're going to reflect on how deliverance looks and feels and I put for David and others, specifically for David, since the psalm is recorded for us in this section of chapters. And it seems like it's just kind of put right in there, and it's described as one that he includes or writes from his deliverance of Saul. Okay, so this was way, way back. And so it seems interesting that whoever was the compiler of 1st and 2nd Samuel, or specifically 2nd Samuel, that whoever it was that found it said, okay, we're going to put that right here with God's guidance there as well. Okay, so we're going to see that in poetic language, and it's going to be really, really impactful, I hope, for you as it was for me. Okay, so I'll leave that up there, and we'll begin in 2 Samuel chapter 21. We've got a few things as usual. We'll read some in each chapter, jumping around, and then we'll make some observations and draw some points out, especially from these that identify what our objectives are tonight. Okay, let's begin in 2 Samuel chapter 21 and verse 1. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David sought the face of the Lord. And the Lord said, "There is blood guilt on Saul and on his house, because he put the Gibeonites to death." So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the people of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had sought to strike them down in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. And David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you, and how shall I make atonement that you may bless the heritage of the Lord?" Okay, let's stop right there at the end of verse 3. Okay, what do we know about the Gibeonites? And I'm borrowing from our next class of Joshua that Ed's going to teach, where they're introduced to us in this context. Who were the Gibeonites? Well, we're told here they're not of the tribe of Israel. So if they're not of the tribe of Israel, but they're in the realm of Israel, that would have made them one of what we could summarily call, I need to think of a better word that doesn't sound like Samaria, but summarizingly call people from the land of Canaan. Okay? So the Gibeonites are of the people who were to be defeated and pushed out or just destroyed, so that Israel can come in and inhabit the land, the promised land that God was giving them. Why are the Gibeonites still here? What happened? How'd they get to stay? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, if I remember right, they tricked Joshua, I think it was, and they pretended they were from a faraway country and made their clothes look old and ragged and basically deceived them. And then they fell for it and decided when they decided that they would kill them. They made like a covenant or something with them.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
Found out like a couple days later that they lied and just were like right down the road.
Exactly. And just to reiterate that for those online who couldn't hear that, the Gibeonites were those, if you've not already used your search engine to find that, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be doing that all the time. They were the ones that came and had old wineskins that were cracked and moldy bread, and they just took it on their journey to go to the land of Israel, or to Joshua and his people, and the people that were defeating the Canaanites, all Israel. And they were saying, they deceived them and said, "We're from far away." And they say, "Look, here's the evidence. When we came, or when we left, these were all new. Our bread was still hot. And we're all just, look at the evidence, okay?" But then they weren't. They were 3 days away, and they had made a covenant very good for the Gibeonites to not be destroyed on their side of the river, you might say. And then for the nation of Israel, they covenanted with a people that they shouldn't have covenanted with. Okay, they didn't, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't inquire of God about all this. And regardless, a covenant was made, and here Saul has broken it. The covenant that they would not destroy the Gibeonites, they would not utterly cast them out, but it ended up turning on them to the point of which where, yes, they did survive, but they would be nothing but cutters of wood and drawers of water. It's like they were set with this task, the lowest of the low. You will take care of the basic needs of everybody else, and that's as high as you're going to get. There's no ladder to climb in this society for you to get a better job, improve your circumstances. This is it. Okay, so probably spent way too much time on that. But this is where Saul, and what's described here, his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah, goes after the Gibeonites. So now we're bringing Saul, more or less resurrecting his history from the dead. And what are we seeing about Saul and how he uses zeal? You can have great zeal 100% zeal, but it can be misplaced in the totally wrong direction. Okay, does that make sense? You can be zealous for what is not good. Okay, any New Testament convert you think of? Who? I guess we've got a few, don't we? We've got a few. Simon the sorcerer, Saul, Paul, who was zealous above, he describes himself as above all of the people that were high up in his arena, even to the point of persecuting the church. Yeah, lots and lots of people, we might say, zealous in the wrong direction, even being described some where Christians would be tormented or persecuted or being put to death by people who would be thinking that they are serving the Lord. Okay, so Gibeonites, zeal, misplaced zeal, Saul. Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
Just what you were saying was a very indirect quote of Romans 10, 1 and 2, of that's their big fear for those around them, that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge.
Yes.
They don't understand the righteousness of God.
Yes, exactly. Romans 10 and verses 1 and 2. Good. Good. Very good. Very good. Okay, verse 4. Man, we've got to get a move on here. The Gibeonites said to him, "It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house. Neither is it for us to put any man to death in Israel." And he said, "What do you say that I shall do for you?" Okay, remember this is David talking to the Gibeonites. They said to the king, "The man who consumed us and planned to destroy us, so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel. Let 7 of his sons be given to us, so that we may hang them before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord." And the king said, "I will give them." How hard would that have been? So you're giving this seemingly a sacrifice of appeasement to these Gibeonites, whom your ancestors covenanted with. And as a king, this is what a king would do. Even to his own hurt, he keeps the covenant. Even to his own consequences, he keeps the covenant. Okay? He doesn't want to do this, right? He's not intent to do this, but the covenant has been broken, and there needs to be an amends of this, that the relationship does not have to be broken, because this was a covenant predating Saul's breach of that covenant. Okay, does that make sense? Hard to be the king. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son Jonathan, because of the oath that the Lord the oath of the Lord that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. Okay, so my assumption is that there is a different Mephibosheth that's mentioned down here. The Gibeonites are not necessarily concerned of which son, just a male relative of Saul's. Okay, and that's what we're seeing here as it's being described from verse 8. The king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of A, whom she bore to Saul, Armani and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Merab, the daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Meholathite. And he gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the mountain before the Lord, and the 7 of them perished together. They were put to death in the first days of harvest, at the beginning of barley harvest. Isn't that interesting? So you're in a famine for 3 years, but still you've got a harvest, and this is what's being harvested. This is what's being threshed out. Okay? You remember how the Old Testament talks about the context of when there is evil amongst you, you must purge it out. Well, this was what happened to make amends for Saul's purge. Okay? Saul's family being purged in this evil action. Now look in verse 10. Then Rizpah, the daughter of A, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock, from the beginning of harvest until rain fell upon them from the heavens. And she did not allow the birds of the air to come upon them by day, or the beasts of the field by night. When David was told what Rizpah the daughter of the concubine of Saul, had done, David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the men of Jabesh-Gilead, who had stolen them from the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them, on the day the Philistines killed Saul on Gilboa. And he brought up from there the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan, and they gathered the bones of those who were hanged. And they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the land of Benjamin in Zelah, in the tomb of Kish his father. And they did all that the king commanded. And after that, God responded to the plea for the land. Okay, that's a phrase that we're going to see later on too. Okay, so God answers. What's the plea for the land? Well, we're not told. There's a famine, so one could assume we need a harvest. We need crops. We need to not have a famine. We're dying. And this is how God responds, because Saul was wrong, recompense was made, and here you've got this act of David to A. What do you think about that? Do you see that coming in this story? You remember we mentioned this occasionally on how people died. You remember how Absalom died? He was, killed in the civil war. Joab thrusting 3 spears in his heart or in his chest, and then surrounded by, 10 of Joab's armor bearers, and they just finished him off. And then where was he thrown? You remember? In his father's tomb? No. He was thrown in a pit. Left. No honor in death. But here you've got David who's gathering the bones of Jonathan, gathering the bones of the first anointed king of Israel. David giving honor in all fronts. Okay? Gathering the bones of these 7 that were hung and honoring them, putting them into the burial tomb of Kish, Saul's father. Okay? And after that, God responded to the plea for the land. Okay? Notice too, Rizpah, Rizpah, the daughter of, how do you say that? A-I-A-H. It's not normal for my pronunciation. But either way, Rizpah was the one there who'd spread it for herself on the rock, this sackcloth and mourning, in honoring these sons of Saul. Okay, not even the legitimate, quote, wife of Saul, a concubine is what she's described as. Okay, any thoughts that you'd like to voice there? Think that's interesting? Okay. Let's look at the very end of that chapter, verses 18 through 22. You have here a record of being against the Philistines and different cities of the Philistines being mentioned. And this is where I take the second objective here. Understand, looks undefeatable doesn't mean undefeatable. Okay, you've got people in this section as the opposers to people of Israel, these men of Israel, who are going to fight them, descendants of the giants. Verse 18 ends of the man that was slain, Saph, who was slain, who's one of the descendants of the giants. And then a man named Goliath, not of Gath, but Goliath the Gittite, another Goliath, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And this being descriptive of, this is his weapon. It's big. This man is big. He's a warrior. And he's struck down. And then you've got verse 20, and there was again a war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature. Isn't that interesting? We're coming to the near end of Samuel, as it's composed into 2 books. But the beginning of Samuel, the king, Saul, is described as a man of great stature, isn't he? Head and shoulders above everyone. But looks are not everything, are they? 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. And he also was descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These 4 were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. What's that tell us? Well, we put this in the context of David fighting Goliath. All Israel backed up, right? They all backed up. How long was it that he taunted Israel? Do you remember? Wasn't it 40 days? Coming twice? Once in the morning, once in the evening? Taunting them. Send out a man. Who's going to conquer me? And then God sends the faithful, the loyal, the one willing to sacrifice. And he conquers. And he becomes king. And he gets the glory. The first king descends while David ascends. And I guess that's one of the reasons we have this song of deliverance, as the ESV titles this in 2 Samuel 22. You have a faithful David who, with all things that require faith, it is stressful. Because faith is going into the black, right? It's going into the darkness. I don't know what's on the other side of this, God. I've never been there. Yes, I've got all these records of David and all these people that had their faith stretched, and I saw how you delivered them and how you got them to the other side. But God, I'm experiencing this right now. This is not comfortable for me. And David says in verse 7, "In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I called. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry came to his ears." And this next section is just incredible. Because this is how what deliverance looks like for David. This is the very vivid and how David would describe it, the rumblings of God moving for him. Okay? This is intense. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations of the heavens trembled and quaked because he was angry. Why is God angry? Well, David's in distress. Why is David in distress? We'll see that in a minute. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He was seen on the wings of the wind. He made darkness around him his canopy, thick clouds, a gathering of water. Out of the brightness before him, coals of fire flamed forth. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice, and he sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen. The foundations of the world were laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. I know I've related this to you before, but it's just so impressive. There's a man who was talking to his wife, and she was really struggling. They were really pushing her at work. They were doing things to her that would demean her, and just was really a bad situation. And she spoke to her husband, just near tears, describing the things that people were saying to her and suggesting to her. Not sexual or anything like that, but it was just an attack on a person's self-esteem and self-worth and their character. Okay? And her husband said to her, yeah, that's really awful. I wish I could just come in there and set everybody straight. But I can't. And so he said, "Did you tell him who your father is?" And she was just, "What are you talking about? You know, my father does this, he lives in this state, and, you know, he's not a powerful man." And he said it again, "No, did you tell them who your father is. And so you get where I'm going, right? As a Christian, her father is the most powerful father there is. There's no bigger. And so in distress, she was just in distress. And so what her husband was telling her to do is say, call out to your father. He will hear you and he will move for you. Just like he did for David. And when you think about that and you visualize yourself calling out and what God is doing, he doesn't just come right when you call, does he? Maybe not like this. But you see, when he's coming, this is how David's visualizing him coming. He's not standing there waiting for you to call again. He's not standing there waiting for you to just become broken beyond repair. He's allowing you to be in distress so that your faith could be fully in him. So that in your distress, you will not seek out me, you, or anybody else who's incapable of delivering like the Lord can. He's putting us in a situation where it's unbearable so that he can come and show us his deliverance. Do you see that? Okay. Verse 17, he sent out from on high. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me. For they were too mighty for me. Do you see his confession? I can't do this. They're too big. They're too many. But with you, God. Verse 19, they confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. Now look down in verse 21. The Lord dealt with me according to my righteousness. Now before we think about, let me just direct you here a little bit. David's not saying that I'm righteous, so you ought to do this, God. Notice how he's saying this. The Lord dealt with me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, he rewarded me. For what? I've kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his rules were before me, and from his statutes I did not turn aside. I was blameless before him and kept myself from guilt. And the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his sight. He's saying, I could not have been clean unless I knew the way to be clean. And God is answering because he is one of his own. He is righteous with God, not without him. And not simply because he's able to follow or that he's got this ability to follow the rules. He's doing it because he's got faith in keeping them, that the Lord will uphold what he has told him that he will. And that's what we see in verses 26 through 31. With the merciful, you show yourself merciful. How else would he know that if he had not given himself to the Lord? With the blameless man, you show yourself blameless. With the purified, you deal purely. And with the crooked, you make yourself seem tortuous. You have humbled people, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them down. For you are my lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. How does he know this? Because he's experienced it. His faith has been stretched a lot more than ours. Verse 36, you have given me the shield of your salvation. And this phrase is really profound to me. And your gentleness made me great. your gentleness made me great. I'll let that rest on your mind. Now let's move on to some other portions of this text. We've got a few more minutes available here, and let's turn over to 2 Samuel chapter 24. 2 Samuel chapter 24. I think it's interesting how God introduces this struggle. It says, again, the anger of the Lord, verse 1 of 2 Samuel 24, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. Against Israel, okay? And he incited or allured or moved David against them, saying, go number Israel and Judah. And you think, man, that's rough. What do you think about this numbering? Well, perhaps we should let the context tell us, and I'll ask the question again. Go number Israel and Judah, verse 2. So the king said to Joab, the commander of the army who was with him, go through all the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, the northernmost and southernmost extents of the kingdom, and number the people that I may know the number of the people. But Joab said to the king, may the Lord your God add to the people 100 times as many as they are, while the eyes of my lord the king still see it. But why does my lord the king delight in this thing? But the king's word prevailed against Joab and the commanders of the army. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to number the people of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and began from Aror and from the city that is in the middle of the valley toward Gad and on to Jazer. And they came to Gilead and to Kadesh and the land of the Hittites, and they came to Dan. From Dan they went around to Sidon and went to the fortress of Tyre and to all the cities of the Hivites and Canaanites. And they went out to the Negeb of Judah at Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave the sum of the numbering of the people to the king in Israel. There were 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword, and the men of Judah were 500,000. What's the result? Why is Joab saying, don't do this? Don't do this. Well, according to this text, what did numbering the people result in from what we've read so far? You've got 800,000 valiant men. Now, isn't that interesting that they're described that way? Because that's the people that Saul wanted to attract to him as king. And then later we saw David having valiant men with him. What are valiant men for? Strength in battle, right? This is how I see, if I'm King David, how big I am. And Joab didn't want him to do that. And I'm assuming that the 500,000 men were not necessarily, it could have been those that were beyond in age or they were retired as soldiers. They were too old to be soldiers, and perhaps even on the other spectrum, too young to be soldiers. But my assumption is the count of the younger, as if to say, these are the men that are coming up to fill in with these 800,000. Okay, that's my assumption. Could be one or the other or both. I guess it can't be both, but it could be the first one that I said. And verse 10 now. But David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people, and David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done, but now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. And when David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, go and say to David, thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you. Choose one of them, that I may do it to you. Yikes. So David asks for mercy. Verse 15 in all of those. So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from the morning until the appointed time. And there died of the people from Dan to Beersheba 70,000 men. Okay? This is not just a cut from the top. This is an entire nationwide shall we say it, a pandemic? Everybody's touched, or everybody knows someone who's touched by it. And when the angel stretched out his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented from the calamity and said to the angel who was working destruction among the people, "It is enough. Now stay your hand." And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Then David spoke to the Lord when he saw the angel who was striking the people. What a sight! And said, "Behold, I have sinned and I have done wickedly, but these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and against my father's house." Who does that sound like that David has encountered in the past? Does it sound like Abigail? On me alone be the guilt. Right? That's what she said. But she's innocent. She was innocent. But the whole idea around this is the seeking out of mercy. The seeking out of, yes, everyone's been paying this price, but now let it stop here. Let it stop at me. Perhaps that's a interesting comparison to those that were in the Corinthian church, where Paul said, why not rather be defrauded than both be defeated by going to law against one another, and even that amongst and before unbelievers? Okay? We ought to be able to solve problems and face off with hard conversations and still wind out on top as God's children. And then Araunah does something perhaps that maybe not any, but as his servant heart to the king, he says, I've got all the things that you need to offer the sacrifice, so just let me give that to you. It'd be an honor for me. And David says, I will not offer, or I will not sacrifice what costs me nothing. Right? But the king said to Araunah, no, but I will buy it from you for a price. I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that cost me nothing. And so the plague was averted. Okay? That's very impressive. In a time when, I guess it's any time, when we can look out for ourselves. I need this. I need to prepare this for my future. And I can't, I'd really just like to not offer anything. But that's the whole idea of sacrifice, isn't it? It's sacrificing. It's painful. It's something that could have been used somewhere else, but you're doing it here because it's a sacrifice. And there's nothing that landed home for me so hard when I read that in college and had very little money. But after I read that, I was convicted and began offering what I could in the collection plate every Sunday. And I didn't have a lot. But really, the point has never been about the money, has it? Of what sacrifice is for. The whole point is making this pattern and this path in my heart and your heart that God's trying to see, Dave, I've got this opportunity for you. I'm trying to lay out on your heart in this path to sacrifice, and this is what it is. This is what it costs, and you can do this. I'm here with you. I'm not going to let you go hungry. I'm not going to let you go without clothing. Those are the things that you need to worry about, and I'm not going to let you go without them, so there is no worry. Dave, do it. It's going to make a man out of you. It's going to make a son out of you. And it's as if God's saying, Dave, this is what my son looks like. I wish you'd just go ahead and do it. And so I can use you later on in life to help others see this and grow them. And God says, all to my glory, so that I can bring you all home. Okay, you see that? So for the next class, there is no text that we're just going to go over and read through. But I'd like for us to look at, and again, I'll mention to those online that in the chat, way in the beginning, I guess, Mark, these might be too small for you to see, but they're in the chat. How has God's message in 1st and 2nd Samuel changed you? About being a father, about raising children, about how people can all be in agreement and all be wrong. Okay, Israel wanting a king, about the cost of being a leader. You've got Saul wanting to do with the people, or all the people fleeing him, and Saul doing things that God doesn't want him to do. About the cost of being a leader, about choosing a leader, about having a solid relationship with God as the only relationship that matters. Okay, you see that with David going up and up and up until his sin with Bathsheba. And then he has that blip. Okay? About grief, loss, mistakes, commitments, and loyalty. You might add on there sacrifice. Okay? I'm sure you'll come up with a better list than these, but these should help get your minds thinking and flowing in that direction. So thanks so much for tonight's class. Hope it's been as beneficial to you as it has for me.